Okay. There we go. All right. We're all the way up to the afternoon now. Good afternoon. Are you able to hear me? No, not yet. It says connecting to audio, but we're not there yet. See that? Okay. Good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
They're all muted. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You can hear? All right. I have one indication someone can hear. If that turns out to be incorrect, please let me know, but I'm going to assume that people can hear at this time. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to have an opportunity to make sure people understood where we are in terms of arrests that have occurred over the last 10 days and a sense of the process that the Philadelphia DA's office is going to be following moving forward in the handling of cases related to unrest and also to some extent related to COVID-19 efforts. So I can tell you that as of 4 o'clock this morning, if we look at essentially a window of about 10 days, 10 and a half maybe, from 2 o'clock in the afternoon on May the 30th through 4 o'clock in the morning on June the 10th, what we see is that there were a total of 1,007 cases arraigned. And by cases, I mean specifically misdemeanor and felony matters. I do not mean the CVNs that were issued for curfew violation. We are estimating there are probably more than 1,000 CVNs that were issued for curfew violation, but it's important to understand that they are, first of all, they are in theory civil. Second, we do not charge them. The charging function is with the police department. We do not do bail hearings or have arraignments on them because the process is to fill out the citation and then release the individual, usually ordinarily within a few hours of arrest, and they will not even be heard in a criminal courtroom. They will be heard in an administrative process in much the same way, at least that's what we believe, in much the same way they were heard after the Democratic National Convention, when City Council had come up with a number of ordinances that were used for the purpose of CVNs. And so it was a very informal proceeding where the person with the CVN, with or without an attorney, would go in, and overwhelmingly those CVNs were thrown out after the Democratic National Convention. I think it's an important point, though, because if we look, for example, at the fiasco that was the Republican National Convention in 2000, what we see is that the police and prosecution were making every effort to bring big, unsustainable, oppressive, excessive charges. And that's not actually what happened for these CVNs. The largest number of people who had contact with police have been put through an administrative civil process that's more analogous to a traffic ticket or something of that nature, right? So in many ways, that is a positive development. However, on top of that group, over the past 10 and a half days or so, we have seen 1,007 cases arraigned that are not curfew violations. They are not CVNs. These are misdemeanors, and these are felonies in Philadelphia County. Of that group of 1,007, 557 of them are burglaries, and 399 are commercial burglaries. Okay, so 399 of the 557 are commercial burglaries. 32 are residential burglaries. There's 126 other burglaries where the data doesn't tell us if they're commercial or residential, but I'm willing to bet you that overwhelmingly they are in fact commercial. What does all that mean? What it means is that the majority of the cases that have been arraigned are arraigned with allegations of people entering commercial establishments without license to be there, without a reason to be there, for the purpose of committing a crime in there, which is usually stealing. In other words, some people would use the word looting, which is not really a technically correct term, but some people would use the term looting. A lot of these cases will be people who have either kicked in the window or gone through the window or the door and are coming out with merchandise at the time that they're caught. So those are a couple of basic numbers for you. Overwhelmingly, what we are seeing with these cases is that people are not being held in custody in relation to them. We are seeing, we've seen a few cases involving people who were felons in possession of a firearm, something like that, which I don't think most of us would associate ordinarily with protest type activity, where there have been some high bails that have been imposed, less than we asked for actually. But in general, we are not seeing any pattern of protesters who engage in peaceful activity being held in custody. We are not seeing a pattern of people who are even arrested with short records or minimal records being held in custody on burglary allegations. We are seeing that in this group, which is now 1,007 people, there are some people being held in custody, although not that many, for what I think a lot of us view as just more traditional criminal activity, because needless to say, drug dealing didn't stop just because there was unrest, and people getting into disputes with each other didn't stop just because this was going on. It was fairly unrelated. So how many cases is 1,007 cases in the greater scheme of things over a period of about 10 and a half days? It is essentially a normal number of cases for normal times. And what I mean by that is we do about 35,000 to 40,000 new cases a year in recent times. And that works out to about 100 new cases a day. This looks like about 100 new cases a day. But I repeat, these are not normal times. And so we have recently seen significantly lower flow of cases. Some of that was due to the police commissioner's policy of only arresting for the most serious types of offenses, shootings, rapes, things like that. We saw a much smaller flow of cases over that time period. So 100 a day does represent a significant increase as compared to that. What else? Well, I think we've noted previously that there's a significant portion of people being arrested with no prior arrest. The numbers are shifting. We have not seen a lot of large arrests happening in the last several days. As you know, things have been much more peaceful in many ways. But during the period of protests, we have seen 39% of the people being arrested had no prior arrests. Compare that to the prior year, and you'll see that in the same period, 28% had no prior arrests. So we're seeing a higher level of people with no prior arrest being arrested during this period. If we look at some of the data we had previously, which was specifically for people arrested for burglary and criminal trespass, what we were seeing recently was that over 40% of them had no prior arrests, and that over 50% had no prior convictions based on the data we had before. We were also seeing a demographic that was overwhelmingly 18 to 24 years of age within that group. I can tell you that for the period 2 p.m. May the 30th through June the 8th, 75% of the people arrested are from Philadelphia. Obviously, some are from nearby areas in collar counties or in New Jersey, and then there is a portion who are from farther away. That's fairly normal in the sense that about 76% on average during this time period are from Philadelphia in normal times. All right. We have had some quirky and unusual arrests going on that are, in a sense, related to the unrest, meaning there may have been opportunistic crimes. They include the ATM explosions that have been going on. We have some arrests related to that. We have had some arrests for gun possession that do not seem to be among people who are really about protest. In fact, if anything, in one case, they might have been about disrupting a protest. And we've had some other really serious and kind of tragic cases, including the case of Angela Hall, who's now accused of running over a police officer after she had committed a burglary and criminal trespass with very serious injuries, and then fraudulently calling in to claim that the rental car she was driving had been stolen, pretty obviously for the purpose of trying to separate herself from the evidence that would show that she was the perpetrator by coming up with this story. We've had that, and we've also, of course, had a couple of burglaries of either a gun shop or a firing range that are extremely serious crimes. And one of those crimes, the person leading the 4 burglars and criminal trespassers who went in was armed with a loaded firearm and was shot and killed by the owner of the firing range, who was on site at the time of this entry, which, by the way, was their second effort to break in. That is a very, very troubling case for many reasons, but one of the reasons is you're dealing with 2 cars and 6 people who have come upon this location, obviously with the idea of removing hundreds of guns and as much ammunition as they could carry. So we've had things like that. There's no sense in which there's any claim that what they did was political, but it was an opportunistic situation in which there may have been the perception on the part of some people that the way police were deployed made it possible for them to try things that they hadn't tried before. So in general, that is what we are seeing. Now, we have a process moving forward. This is an office that has made clear and will make clear again that we highly value people's constitutional rights, including their right of free expression and protest and to assemble under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution and also under the Pennsylvania Constitution. We also take our obligation to keep the city safe extremely seriously. And so in these somewhat unprecedented times, we have a number of challenges. One challenge is to make sure that police and civilians alike are accountable. So it means we have to take a look at what occurred with the self-styled vigilantes in Fishtown and the evidence that is out there about 2 beatings and another crime. On top of that, we have to take a look at incidents in which there may be allegations of crimes committed by police officers, and we take that obligation seriously, as I think is clear from our bringing charges against Inspector Bologna. We have to look very seriously at all the cases that have been brought against civilians, and figure out which of these really just represent peaceful protest, if any of them do, and deal with them accordingly, because peaceful protest is not a crime. We need to look at the cases that some people refer to as looting cases, but that involve destruction of property, theft of property. And we need to figure out to what extent each of the people involved can be held accountable only by a conviction, and to what extent a person involved can be held accountable in other ways because that person's life demonstrates that they're not fundamentally criminal. When we see very high levels of people being arrested who have no prior contacts with police, no serious criminal record, and are very young, in a moment of national pain, we need to think long and hard and very carefully and look closely at every single case about how we can do what is best for all of society, including those store owners, including the communities that have in certain instances been left without available pharmacies and without available grocery stores. We need to look very carefully and thoughtfully at all of that. And then we need to look at everything else, including the ordinary crimes that we find within this crew. And so we have started and we'll be moving forward quickly this week with assembling a task force of people who have a variety of different types of expertise, ideas, input, and hopefully some different ideas than each other about how we are going to avoid the disaster that was the handling of cases during the Republican National Convention, which lasted 4 years and resulted in 99% acquittals on the charges and 98% acquittals of the defendants. It was frankly the misuse of governmental power against peaceful protests there. The situation here is, I think, a little more complicated, but we want to make sure that what we do here is done in light of all the facts, that one size does not fit all, that we look for individual justice in each case, that we do this as efficiently and swiftly as we can, given that we already have a backlogged and burdened court system. And we want to make sure that whatever charging decisions were made under difficult circumstances with legitimate problems in receiving information, that we are not moving forward without getting all the information, getting it from individuals, getting it from law enforcement sources. We want the truth. We want the truth no matter who it helps, no matter who it hurts. We want all of it. And we want to make sure that this is handled appropriately. And therefore, we're having what is, in essence, a task force to deal with the many different aspects we have to confront. The processing of ordinary cases, the special investigations that will have to go with evaluating what occurred, the appropriateness or not in specific cases of dropping the case or of diversion or of vigorous prosecution where appropriate. So, and with that, are there any questions? Oh, yes. Okay. I neglected to mention our census for the day in the jails because, needless to say, before much of this unrest, one of our primary emphases was trying to control the spread of COVID by playing a role along with the Public Defender's Office and with the FJD by playing an important role in keeping that population reduced. The census as of today for county jail population is 3,993. There is great danger of that number increasing, given that we still don't have an easily functioning court system. It's a challenge we're going to have for quite some time. Recent mass testing indicates that our success in reducing the jail population by about 20% has enabled us to avert coronavirus infections and fatalities, such as those that were tragically seen in other jail facilities and congregate facilities elsewhere. But obviously there's more to do, and we look forward to working with our criminal justice partners with the support of the public to try to keep everyone in society safe. That, of course, includes the correctional officers, those who are inmates, families, others who work in those facilities, and the communities to which they all return when they are able to leave either at the end of the day or at the end of a period of time in custody. So we have that. Are there any questions? None? All right. Thank you all.